Since we're in the Zildjian factory in Norwell, Massachusetts today, it's like the perfect setting to talk about cymbals. But before we get deeper into everything you need to know to pick your perfect cymbal setup, let's just quickly get a short look at the factory. Now we got Jordan Wright here with us, and he's gonna tell us a lot about what parts you have on a cymbal and what changes the sound. So before we get started, could you just let us know what exactly is your job here at Zildjian?
Sure. So I work in cymbal R&D on the R&D team. So we design new cymbals. We listen to what artists and customers are looking for sounds, and we're developing new models to fit all the sounds that people want.
So since you're constantly working on new cymbals and developing them, you need to know your way around how to build a cymbal and how to come up with a certain sound. So the cymbal we got here just is a basic 23-inch sweet ride. Could you just guide us along with what parts of the cymbal there are and what factors there are that change the sound?
Most cymbals, with a few exceptions, they always have three main sections. You've got a bell, and sometimes we call this a cup, some people call it a bell, the body, this middle section, and then the edge. So the anatomy of a bell in general, the larger, taller, and wider the bell, the louder and more projection a cymbal has. So this A has a very substantial bell, it's very round. Other cymbals, say like a Carope, might have a much smaller and a lower profile bell that brings the volume down a bit and it brings the projection down a bit. And so we have a whole set of different bells that we'll test as we go in R&D a cymbal to dial in what's the perfect amount of projection and volume for that sound that we're going for. The body of the cymbal is that curvature. The more curved we make the cymbal, so the higher that profile, we can raise the pitch of the cymbal. The lower and flatter the profile of the cymbal is, the lower the pitch. And that can also change how loose or tight the cymbal feels. I like to think of cymbals actually like a spring. We're actually storing some energy in the cymbal, and that curvature really affects the kind of spring that a cymbal has. If you've ever seen a cymbal flip inside out, that's like a spring, changing states. And then the edge, this is the part of the cymbal that you can crash, and depending on how thin the edge is relative to the body, really changes how crashable a cymbal is. So if we call that a taper. If we make the edge of the cymbal much thinner than the body of the cymbal. If we taper it, that makes the edges very flexible and loose, but keeps the center much more solid. So that's the main areas of the cymbal that matter.
Now we got three crashes here, an A thin crash, A medium crash, and A rock crash. Quickly, what's the main difference between those?
Sure, so the main difference, we're using the same cup on all three of these cymbals, and the main thing that's changing here is the weight. And the taper changes a bit to get to those different sort of weight classes, but this is a good way to compare a similar design of a cymbal at different weights. We'll start on the thin side, so this is a thin crash. Then a medium crash. Do the honors on the rock crash.
Yeah, you can clearly tell that the pitch is going down with a heavier cymbal.
Yeah, so the pitch changes over the different weights. And the other thing that's hard to communicate over video is the feel. So at a lighter weight, this cymbal is thinner, and so it will be more flexible than its heavier sibling. And so that's one part of it is the sound, but then under the stick, of course, the thinner you go, the more the cymbal will flex. And depending on the context, that can really change how you play the cymbal.
Those three cymbals are a 16-inch, 18-inch, and 20-inch A thin crash.
All three of these are in the same weight range relative to their size, but obviously we're changing the diameter of the cymbal, and you can see the bells are obviously three very different sizes, sort of proportional to the size of the cymbal. And so on all three of these, we're shooting for proportionally similar bell and similar profile, and similar weight, but we'll hear the pitch change more drastically than even they did at the weight classes as we step up in size. So I'll play the 16, the 18,
And the 20. Now we got three very different cymbals here. Can you just like talk us through what sets them apart?
So on my left, we have a custom crash. So this features very tight lathing, and then we polish the surface. So the goal here is to create as smooth of a surface as possible. This creates a very kind of glassy crash sound. It's not quite as cutting as other finishes, but the effect is, yeah, very smooth and very glassy. This is traditional A lathing. If you zoomed way in at that cross section, there are some of those tonal grooves, some of those peaks and valleys left in the metal. Those help to project the sound a bit more, when we're comparing to a totally smooth surface. And then on my right, we have, even though it's from the K family, a very different finish. So here on the bell, we've left the surface totally unlathed. We've just cleaned it up. And then in the body, we just have a scratch pass. So you can see that sort of spiral where we've cut down to bronze, but the rest of the cymbal is still the oxidized surface from the rolling process. So I'll go through and compare. So this is an A custom. Here's the A thin crash. And the special dry.
It's also a little shorter, right?
Shorter, yeah. So that, similar to taping the underside of a cymbal, that oxide actually has a similar effect where it's absorbing some of that energy and making the cymbal decay faster. So that's another effect of the lathing process.
Okay. What surprises me is that you're telling us that the brilliant cymbal isn't the more cutting one compared to this one.
This is a common misconception that making a cymbal brilliant or brighter visually also makes it brighter sound-wise. It's sort of like what your eyes tell you, it would make sense that that's what your ears hear. Both of these cymbals exist in a very bright territory. So we're talking about a difference on the bright end of that spectrum. And it's really just two different flavors of bright. So to my ear, I do hear some more high end and some more cutting here, but this is just a different sort of smoothed out, glassy high end. We selected these sort of break those rules of anatomy that we talked about before in three different ways. So a flat ride has a lot of the same design characteristics. It has profile, it has body and edge, it has hammering and lathing, but no bell, no cup. And so when we talked about before, that cup is sort of the resonator, and that's what projects the volume. If you have a smaller bell, that gets it quieter. If you have no bell at all, that makes it even quieter still. And so a flat ride ends up, its maximum volume is very quiet, and it still has a lot of the other characteristics that a typical ride has. It's just all exists in this very low volume and different territory. So I'll play some just so you can hear it.
Now, while this one is pretty quiet, those aren't, right?
These two are loud, yeah. So this china breaks the rule of the profile that we were talking about, or it plays with that rule. So rather than a sort of constant curvature, like a typical ride or a crash or a hi-hat might have, chinas invert the profile. And so rather than a sort of nice, clean and friendly sound from a nice, smooth profile, the flange adds a lot of dissonance and harshness to the sound. Another effect is it makes the cymbal much more rigid. So part of that rigidity is why chinas generally need to be hit pretty hard to get resonating. Similar to making a spring as an analogy, this would be a very stiff spring. And so it needs a lot of energy as an input to get moving. So yeah, these cymbals generally are hit hard and they're very harsh sounding. And it's the profile flanging out that creates the harshness. And then on the right here, we have a K E effect cymbal. So this has a typical bell, typical profile, and the difference is by removing material in that pattern, we change how the sound travels around the cymbal. So normally, sound can take these nice round, paths around the cymbal or in and out around the cymbal as it resonates and as the cymbal moves. In an EFX cymbal, we break up those paths that the sound might normally travel in a cymbal. So the effect is, it plays a lot with the speed. So an EFX cymbal decays much faster than its solid sibling. And it makes it more trashy. So because it's not as clean and it's not continuous, yeah, it makes it a lot dirtier sounding. You want to demo that one?
Sure. Kind of a nasty sound.
Nasty. Yeah, that's a good word
Nasty
for it.
sound. I'm here now with Eric Gross, Artist Relationship Manager from Zildjian Headquarters.
Yep.
So could you first let us know what exactly does A&R or Artist Relation mean?
So artist relations is strictly dealing with our artists on our roster. So all of our for me, it's drum set artists mainly. And anytime our artists need something, they come through us. So we pick cymbals, we'll see them at shows and we work with them sometimes on product and, we work with them. They always have suggestions for us and, we work really closely with all of our artists when it comes to cymbals.
So can you just give us a short overview of the aspects of a cymbal that you take into consideration when it comes to finding the perfect cymbal for one of the artists?
Sure, so it's really based on what they give me for information. A lot of artists will request a certain weight. And in that case, what I personally like to do is pick maybe 4 or 5 cymbals that are in the weight range that they've asked for. And then I play the cymbals and see how they sound. And if they don't give me any direction on the sound portion, I just try to pick what I think is the best sounding cymbal. Maybe something that's not too high, not too low, that has some control, has some good stick. That's how I do it. And then it's worked pretty well. A lot of other times they'll ask for more than that. They'll ask for weight. And they'll ask for, well, I want a darker sounding, K-con, medium, thin, low, or I want a higher pitched, or make sure the stick is clear, because sometimes a cymbal can be pretty washy and maybe the stick isn't as pronounced. So that's really it. I basically let them, sometimes they're like, I like this weight and just pick what you think is best. In a situation where I'm working with an artist, like I said, sometimes I'll throw them curveballs. Sometimes they work really well, like if they're trying K-cons and, they're like, here's an A custom, like, Nate Smith, for example, I always thought it was amazing that, he plays K-cons, 15-inch Carope hats, but he has a 16-inch A custom crash to his right, which is so unique, but it works. It's just a different color of sound. And I think that's the thing. A lot of the time, it's, if you have all, a setup of one kind of cymbal, it's awesome to have a surprise in there. So, go to the opposite end of the spectrum. That's what I would do. And then work your way back to something a little safer, I guess. So if somebody was playing all K-cons, for example, and they wanted to add a little different color, maybe I would go to an A custom crash, or maybe a K EFX or an A custom EFX, and just let them play and do their thing and have them incorporate that cymbal to their playing and see how it sounds. Sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not, but that's how you got to do it. You have your drummers that you look up to, and I think that's where it starts. If you're a fan of a certain drummer and they're playing a certain cymbal, you probably are going to gravitate towards that. But I mean, it's also, there are no rules. There's nothing. We have a lot of rock guys that'll play some Caropes, and typically those are considered a jazz cymbal, or for lack of a better term. But same with our K-con line. A lot of our heavier hitters and rock guys, they like the K-cons. So I mean, it's really, you need to just go and find out for yourself. There's no right or wrong answer. You need to go and you need to explore everything that we have and start eliminating some sounds that aren't going to work for you for your playing.
If you start as a drummer or you got a drum kit, what would you recommend as like starting setup?
So what I gather from that is like versatility, and in my opinion, 14-inch new beats are probably the most versatile hi-hats. I actually use those my whole life. They got me through anything. The technical aspects of the new beat, the extra heavy bottom and the thin top, typically that's going to get you a nice crisp hi-hat sound. And you can apply that to any set of hi-hats. When I pick hi-hats for artists, that's how I can kind of get started, depending on what they're asking for. If they're asking for a nice chick and they're asking for caropes, I'll make sure I pick a really heavy bottom, a really light top, and start from there. If they're looking for more washy cymbal sound, or hi-hat sound rather, sometimes I'll put two tops together. A little bit of a separation, maybe a heavier top and a lighter top, but it's gonna get you that washier sound. So I always recommend, if I'm ever being asked, like, what do you recommend, whether it's for, a beginning drummer or, maybe a professional drummer, I always throw out certain things like the new beats. Have you tried the new beats yet? Because, it's an A line, so maybe not as sexy as a line as like maybe a K-con or a carope, but when it comes to getting the job done and being able to get you through every gig, personally, I think, an A thin crash, the A new beats, and then the K line, straight Ks or K suites.